Hello, this is Professor Keith Ross from the John Jay College of Criminal Justice. This is yet another in a series of lectures for my college classes. This lecture is going to be for my criminal investigation class, and we're going to discuss Chapter 6, which is the follow-up investigation. So this chapter really sort of coincides with Chapter 5, the crime scene protocols chapter, in that you don't have one without the other. As soon as a crime scene has been established and you've collected evidence, you start processing that evidence. Well, now that follow-up investigation begins. Could begin at the crime scene, it could begin days later, and I'm going to sort of discuss that. So the follow-up investigation, exactly what I just said. Sometimes the number of leads that you have are minimal. It really depends. You might have just a victim. And what happens if we're talking about just a victim of a homicide? We don't really have any witnesses, or we haven't found witnesses right at this moment. Just because we don't have witnesses does not mean a follow-up investigation does not begin, because at the very least we have, and this is going to sound bad, but we have the body. So we can analyze what was the cause or manner of death. We can also figure out the time of death. And then if we're looking at the crime scene, is there evidence that connects probatively to that death? Therefore, the investigator must perform immediate CPR on the case. And as I said, there's lots and lots of acronyms. You don't really have to remember each and every one of these acronyms. Some of them are intuitive. We're going to conduct canvasses, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. But if I remember correctly, I even discussed what a canvas was in crime scene protocol. So again, this really sort of lends to the fact of how important a canvas or an investigation is. A police records check, and I want to sort of further extend that thought. It's not only internal police systems, but internet checks can be so valuable, and we're going to get into that. And if we've collected physical evidence, well, we examined it at the scene, but maybe we want to re-examine that physical evidence. And also, again, extending that idea, not just physical evidence, but testimonial evidence, things of that nature. So the canvas, last chapter, we talked about what a canvas is. A canvas is an investigation. It's looking around. It's a search. It's a visual search. So a canvas is an investigative tool that allows the investigator the chance to locate witnesses, information, I'm going to add evidence, and leads into the case. The canvas should always begin at the location of the incident and then spiral outward. And if you look at slide number 6 on the accompanying PowerPoint to this, well, he sort of puts a courtyard in the middle. And if you notice, you would start canvassing at that courtyard and then you radiate out. Doesn't matter how you want to radiate out. If you want to do it clockwise, if you want to do it counterclockwise, if you want to sort of break a block into quadrants or slices of a pie, that's going to be a personal preference as per the investigator conducting this investigation. Types of canvases. Surveillance cameras. Now, for those of you that live in New York City, there are surveillance cameras all around. We have traffic cameras. In commercial establishments, there are cameras all over the place. In John Jay, there are cameras all over the place. If we're talking about residences, don't discount the fact that people don't have cameras in their residences anymore with the advent of Ring doorbells and Nest doorbells and things of that nature. There is a lot of surveillance, and if it doesn't have to be a victim or a particular witness, it could be someone that lives next door, and you could ask for access. And if it was an actual crime that was committed, if the person doesn't grant access, you can always bring that to a judge and try and subpoena the evidence. Don't know how well that's going to go. It really depends on how accurately you can show that the video footage could connect to the crime. Canvases of the hospitals. Now, if we're talking about assault victims, sexual assault victims, possibly homicide victims, gang-related incidences, well, we want to check the hospitals to see if anyone has checked in there. Witness canvases, can't stress this enough. You got to pound on doors, knock on doors each and every time that you're addressing this case. You're probably not going to address the case every day. You're rotating cases. But however, every couple of days, you're going to go out there and seek leads. Vehicle canvases, and vehicle canvases can be, if we know a person's name, we can run their name through, let's say, a DMV computer check, see if there's any registered vehicles. You can also check via address to see if there are any registered vehicles in the address. Getting back to something we just said, surveillance cameras. Surveillance cameras might show license plates. We could run those plates, see if there is a possible probative nexus or connection to that. Evidence canvas. That's sort of intuitive. Just because we searched a crime scene once does not mean we found everything, especially if we're talking about nighttime crime scenes. If we're talking about a nighttime crime scene, most police departments have some sort of procedure on the books that if something happened at night, even though you brought tons and tons of lights and you lit the place up, you're going to conduct an evidence search the very next day via sunlight, because there really is no better light source than sunlight. And I can't stress this enough, a social media canvas. It's going to sound crazy to some of you, but for those people that committing crimes is what they do, they like to boast about that stuff. And where are they going to boast about it? They're going to boast about it with their friends. How do they do that? Usually by social media. So their Facebook, their Instagram, Twitter, World Star Hip Hop, things of that nature. So I sort of went through these types of canvases: surveillance cameras, commercial establishments, residential, traffic lights, red light traps, bridges, tunnels, police cameras, what we call the Argus cameras, which are all around New York City. Hospitals, you want to query local hospitals for anyone who entered the emergency room with any suspicious wounds. Now, hospitals are required by New York state law to report any shootings or stabbings. So if a person comes into that hospital, it is incumbent upon the people that are registering that person to contact the authorities and let them know that we have a stabbing victim. Just because we're saying a stabbing victim does not mean that the person is actually a victim. This could be a perpetrator or a suspect or a witness. However the cookies crumble and fall, that's how they're going to fall. But police are going to want to be alerted about that. Talked about additional witnesses and vehicle. I also talked about evidence. One of the things that I sort of want to discuss is this trash cover idea, or this idea of trash. Now, it's sort of a complicated issue. Now, let's say we live in a house. If I live in a house, I'm protected by the Fourth Amendment, meaning that the police cannot just barge into my house and say, we're going to search. They're either going to need my consent, and my consent has to be given voluntarily, intelligently, and or knowingly, or they're going to have to obtain a search warrant, meaning that they're going to have to go to a judge and apply for this search warrant and show probable cause that there is some sort of fruits of the crime in my house, and that's what they're looking to search for. Well, this idea of me having a privacy interest in my house also extends into what's called the curtilage, the area that surrounds my house. So let's say I have garbage cans right next door to my house. Well, just like the police can't break into my house to go search, if my garbage cans are on my curtilage right next to my house, police cannot search that garbage without a search warrant. Now, here's where the gray areas come in. Well, what do we normally do with garbage? Well, normally what we do is we take our garbage out. Okay, so we take our garbage out, and what do? We put it on the street. Now, the question is, well, why do you put it on the street? Well, the expectation is that you're expecting some sort of sanitation service, whether public or private, to pick up this garbage and dump it for you. Now, if you have abandoned this property, meaning you've taken your garbage cans off of your curtilage, you've put it on a public street, and what a reasonable person would say is that the reason why I put this garbage can on the street is because I want sanitation to pick it up. Most courts have stated that you have abandoned your privacy interests because if you're going to allow sanitation to throw it, there shouldn't be anything in there that should be worrisome to you. Now, so police can technically, or investigators can technically search abandoned property. However, I would err on the side of caution, especially in the zeitgeist of today, where there is a lot of criticism of police procedure or investigative procedure. That if I was an investigator and I had reasonable grounds to believe, meaning probable cause, that there was something in that garbage that could be probative or could be helpful to my case, what I would probably do is get a couple of uniform officers to guard that garbage, to not let anyone touch it, and obtain a search warrant. Again, we talked about social media canvases. So checking names for Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, World Star Hip Hop, whatever other social media platforms there are. And I would also extend this idea to doing a search for the person's name and their street name, if known, and use the various internet search engines. So I would search Google, I would search Yahoo, and I would search Bing. Now you would think, well, why am I using three different search engines? Because those three different search engines, what they do is they sort of send out these spiders looking for the information that was put in that search bar. But sometimes they find differing things. So it takes you less than a second to type in a person's name in Google, in Bing, in Yahoo, any other search engines that you might possibly think of. Those are the three that I would probably use. And also, as a proviso, and I should have probably said this in the beginning, anything that we talk about in this chapter and especially the next chapter, I implore you to not use this for any sort of illegal or nefarious means. All right, this is just purely informational for my classes in regards to investigations. If you do anything, I disavow all knowledge. I am not connected to your issues, so please don't do it. How do we secure digital evidence? We use screenshots, we use digital cameras, we use cell phone cameras, and then we will attempt to get a subpoena. So if someone gets arrested and they have a cell phone on them, and for my criminal investigation class in the search and seizure lectures, we sort of talked about this, that I can invoice that property so I can take it from them. But if I think that there's something in that phone that could help my investigation, time is not of the essence. And if time is not of the essence, that means that there is time enough for me to go get a search warrant. Now, this would be different if we were talking about, let's say, some sort of bomb threat, some sort of kidnapping scenario where time was of the essence. Well, then you could articulate that this was an exigent circumstance or some sort of emergency exception to that search warrant rule. Police record checks. What are we looking for? We're looking for people that are connected to the victim, people that are connected to the suspect, places that are connected to the victim, places that are connected to the suspect. Also, when we're talking about the victim, we want to think about this idea of what is victimology or the study of the victim. Did they lead low risk or high risk lives? Meaning, were they drug users? Were they prostitutes? Were they something to that effect? Or were they, sort of the average Joe that, went to work every day, worked their 9 to 5, went to church on Sunday, didn't go out, things of that nature. And things talking about evidence. If we're talking about suspects and we have a suspect either in custody or not, what do we want to do? Well, we want to find, has this suspect ever committed this offense or an offense that looks like this? Police record checks. So we're going to check the ICAT or the 911 system. Usually, more often than not, police are reactive, meaning that if they're reactive, they're reacting to something. And what are they reacting to? They're reacting to the radio. They're reacting to getting a 911 call, which means someone called that in. When a person calls into 911, the name of the registered owner of that phone pops up as well as a billing address. If we have a suspect, we want to run their arrest history. We want to find out how many times they were arrested. What were they arrested for? Is this a pattern of behavior? Also, one of the other things on arrest records is that there might be quote unquote co-defendants. So now I've gotten another lead. Well, now I have a lead on my suspect, and let's say someone else was arrested with this person maybe a year ago. Well, maybe I want to at least interview this person and find out some information. Not saying I'm not accusing this other person as of yet, but it might help. Aided or accident reports. What we're talking about here is if someone got injured, I want to run the name. Have they ever been injured before? Have they ever requested the police? And not only do I want to run the name, but I also want to run the address, see if there were any aided reports generated from that address. When we're talking about accident reports, what we're talking about are vehicle accident or vehicle collision reports. Has that person ever been involved in a vehicle collision? Want to check that out. Again, complaint reports. Have they ever called the police? Have the police ever been called on them? Same thing with domestic incident reports. Have they ever been the victim of domestic violence, or were they a suspect of domestic violence? I want to check that out. I want to check out DMV records. I want to find out, do they have a license? Do they have a non-driving DMV license? Do they have any registered vehicles in New York State? Also want to check the wanted persons database. So I want to check databases like eJustice, NCIC, things of that nature. Information from records. Link a person to the object, link a person to another person, or link a person to a place or a time. That is sort of intuitive. When I'm investigating, I want to investigate Niatwi. So if I'm looking at this person, I want to know what happened, who did it happen to, who did it, and who else was with that person that did it, and who saw it, things of that nature. So you want to try and create these connections. Re-examination of physical evidence, you always have to go back, not sometimes, you're always going to go back to that scene because it's just human nature to sometimes miss something. It's one of the geniuses about our brains. We're always constantly processing things, and sometimes different day, different processes take place. So I want to see, did I miss something? There could be, maybe I didn't miss something, but it never hurts to double check and triple check. If I have evidence, well, where is that evidence right now? Where is that chain of custody? That evidence was vouchered. Is it being processed? Who is it being processed by? What's the status of that processing? Go over crime scene photos and go over any videos that have been obtained regarding this incident, whether it's surveillance, police, whatever the case may be. Whatever videos that we have obtained, we want to check them, and we want to continually check them because, again, there might be things that we missed. Maybe there's audio on this videotape and it sounded garbled. Well, you know what? Now I'm going to listen to it over and over again. And if it takes me checking it 20 times to get one sentence, but I can articulate that sentence clearly, well, then so be it. And then I would write that down on what's called a DD5. The integrated ballistics identification system, that's basically exactly what you think it is. It's maintained by the ATF, and really what it is, it's a database of ballistic information. Every gun that gets fired has a distinct imprint. So when you depress a trigger on a firearm, the cartridge or the bullet starts spinning, and there are grooves inside the barrel of that gun. These are all unique and distinct. And by testing this stuff, we can sort of trace a cartridge to the firearm that fired that cartridge. And then possibly, was there a registered owner? If there wasn't a registered owner, we don't have to fret because most guns are made of metal. And what is metal a fairly good conductor of? Fingerprints. We could try and lift fingerprints. Maybe we might be able to get some touch DNA, although sometimes I think with the amount of explosive energy that gets depressed from a firearm, it's a really concentrated burst of heat might destroy DNA, but I don't think it's going to destroy the fingerprints too much. Last two slides. Crime Stoppers, an anonymous tip line that pays cash to individuals that provide real information about perpetrators leading to an arrest. It puts money out on the street for information. The money is donated by both individuals and corporations, like sort of like the Police Foundation, things of that nature. And again, the perpetrator, not only does the perpetrator have to be arrested via probable cause, but a grand jury has to take place and a true bill or an indictment has to take place, meaning that we're either going to trial or they're going to eventually plea bargain down. Conducting surveillances. Now, what is a surveillance? A surveillance is just an observation. I believe I talked to you guys about People versus DeBoer and those 4 levels of intrusion, 4 levels of knowledge, 4 levels of suspicion, where a police officer might have to articulate what they're doing. A surveillance, if we're talking level 1, 2, 3, and 4, a surveillance is level 0. A police officer, an investigator, never has to articulate a reason why they're conducting a surveillance. Doing this is a surveillance. So there are 3 main forms of surveillance, either mobile via a car or on foot. Could be a fixed post or, what we see in the movies called a stakeout, or electronic surveillance, meaning wiretaps, and not only wiretaps, but, now with technology being as advanced as it is, possibly even like pinhole cameras that are so small that you can barely see them. These can also be utilized to conduct surveillances. And if you're going to enter a person's home to tap their phones, ping their cell phones, or install some sort of video surveillance, obviously, again, a search warrant has to be obtained. Well, this was a quick chapter. Again, this was sort of an extension of what we talked about with crime scenes. That's going to be it for me. I wish you guys a great day. Take care.